Alright, hey guys, LMC here, and today I'm out at A1 again, pinching one of their bikes, and they've given me what I asked for, which is the 300R. So, a couple of weeks ago, I got to ride the 250R, and I was kind of a bit lukewarm about it. As you know, good bike, but not a great bike is kind of the take-home message of that. So this is the replacement for that. So this is the CBR300R. I mean, right off the bat, it's a bit grubby, this one, but God, it looks so much better, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this front end is just 1,000% better. Those pair of eyes, they look fantastic. It's fantastic for a little bike. It looks so much better. This is the all black version. You can get, I think, it in red, and I think you can also get like a special edition one which has some sort of yellow fluorescent accents. But this is just the all black one. Looks fantastic, I reckon. So I'll be interested to see if this sort of changes my opinion on the sort of little single cylinder bikes. I don't expect this thing to sort of wow me in comparison to the 250R. I expect it to be quite an incremental change. It'll be a better bike, but I don't expect it to really kind of blow my mind. So what I'm going to do is use this video as a bit of a chance to compare the three 300cc bikes I've ridden from these Japanese manufacturers. So last week, or whenever it was, you saw me ride the R3 briefly from Yamaha, and then of course I've ridden the Ninja a little while ago. So now that I've got this bike, I'm just going to do a bit of a comparison, tell you which one I probably would buy, and or if I buy them at all, and just give you a bit of a, I suppose, a bit of a head-to-head. I mean, I won't have the other two bikes with me today, so it won't be the most appropriate head-to-head, but I'm just going to see, which of these three ones would I buy and why. But before we get started, you've got to hear how this thing sounds. So just the 300cc single cylinder, but it's got an aftermarket pipe on it, and it just gives it the most amazing barking noise that I've ever heard. Listen to that. Oh, that makes me giggle like a child. Alright, that'll do. Let's go for a ride. Alright guys, here we are. I'm away from the traffic. I'm on the 300R. So the first thing I'll notice, I'll kind of start this video where I started the 250R video. This bike sounds so much better than the 250R video, and I know that that's entirely down to this pipe. But God, I mean, it sounds fantastic, this little thing, and for a totally different reason than anything else. Like, so my bike, the 500F, kind of has a nice grumbly kind of like little muscle bike sound about it. It's sort of big and kind of has a big sound for a little bike. And the 250R, the one I rode a little while ago, of course, has that super high revving baby kind of Formula One sound about it. Whereas this doesn't have either of those things. What this has is a bark. This bike just barks like a dog. When you listen to that. It doesn't have, it just kind of sounds like it's a kid that wants your attention. Oh shit, whenever I hear these kind of things, it just makes me giggle like a child. I feel like I lose 10 years off my life and I revert back to when I'm like 15, and these kinds of things make me laugh. Oh, they make me laugh again. But yeah, this thing sounds like a little dog. I'll see if I can listen to it. Oh, again, I'm sure the camera's not doing it justice, but believe me when I say that this thing just, if you're not hard on the throttle, like if you're really smooth with the throttle, it's not so bad. Well, it's not so barky, but it's when you sort of chop the throttle that you get this great barking noise. Listen to this. Okay, so other things compared to the 250R. This actually, I'm surprised, this actually feels like it buzzes more. So when you're up over what I am now, 60 is not so bad, but once you approach 70, you actually find that I feel like this bike buzzes more than the 250R did. You feel like you get more of a vibrating feel through your bum. Listen to that bark. Yeah, so here we go. So now I'm up at 70, and I can definitely feel this thing vibrating my ass, and to a much greater degree than the 250R did. So that's interesting. I didn't expect it to be, you know, I mean, it's a single cylinder, so I know that kind of the buzziness and the vibratiness comes with that, but I didn't expect it to vibrate more than the 250R, and if it did, I didn't expect it to vibrate this much more. It vibrates a lot more, so keep that in mind if you're thinking about getting this bike. It does vibrate. The other thing is that it actually physically feels bigger too. So that was something I didn't anticipate. I mean, I know that 50cc's is slightly bigger than the 250R, and that just means that, you know, the engine's a little bit bigger. But I didn't expect Honda to actually make the bike feel bigger. So most noticeably through the tank, actually, I feel like my knees are further apart riding this bike compared to the 250R. So it does actually feel bigger, and this feels bigger than the Ninja 300 as well, actually. The Ninja 300 is quite narrow through the middle of it. This actually sort of has a bit of width to the tank, which I kind of like, I must admit, because it's more, this is now more reminiscent of my bike because of that extra width through the tank. So I like it. Okay guys, so I took it up the hill, but it got really, really foggy, which was nice, but I had to kind of concentrate just to ride. So I'm going to head back down the hill to finish this video off now. Pick up where I left off. So to kind of just wrap up comparing this bike to the 250R, it is very, very similar. You know, it really is the same bike in many, many respects. It feels a little wider, it buzzes a little bit more. This one's got a pipe on it, so this one sounds better, but you know, put a pipe on the 250R and it'll sound pretty cool as well. But for the most part, they're just a totally, you know, they're very, very similar bikes. This is just a very incremental update. I think the main reason this one is worth having is because it looks so much better. So I personally think this one looks fantastic, whereas I think the 250R kind of looked a little bit confused. You know, it didn't quite hit the little sports bike look on the head, whereas I think this one has. But what I really wanted to get into now with this video was comparing this bike to the Ninja 300 and the Yamaha R3, which is what you guys saw me ride very recently. And just to kind of give you guys a sense of which one I would buy and why. So, just to cut straight to that chase, I would have the R3. The reason for that is that I think they all look great. You know, I think the R3, Ninja, and this all look fantastic. You know, they all look like little itty-bitty sports bikes. And so any learner who's looking for like a fared sports style of bike is going to be really proud to have these bikes, because I think they look awesome. Now, of course, do they look like big, powerful bikes? No, of course not. You get close enough, you realize that it's a very small bike. But for what they are, I think they look sensational. And if you chuck a slip-on pipe on any of them, they all sound sensational too, in my opinion. So, I mean, yeah, look, any one of those three you're going to be happy with. But I would have the R3. The reason for that is I think that it looks the best, but only slightly. So it's quite a subjective thing. I think it looks just a little bit better than the other two. But it really depends on what look you're going for. You know, so the R3 has the very kind of sharp, aggressive look to it. Whereas, you know, this one, the Honda 300R, Honda's gone for more of a kind of a understated, sleek look with this bike. So it doesn't have as many sharp edges or points to it. But what it does have is really subtle, clean lines, and the front of it looks sexy, but not super aggressive. And and when you look at this bike, when you look at the 300R, you can see so clearly that they're basically trying to make it look like a tiny Fireblade. You know, the front end of this thing is really, really reminiscent of the 1000RR. And that bike is a bike that kind of, in my opinion, has a very, you know, a very sport bike look, but it's kind of understated and kind of more of a slick look. Whereas you compare those bikes to something like, you know, the new R1 or the new H2 from Kawasaki, and those bikes are very angular, very aggressive, lots of hard, sharp lines. So Honda hasn't really gone for that. So it really depends on your preferences. Personally, I think the R3 looks just a little bit better than this, but the main reason I'd have the R3, and really the reason that it wins it for me is because of that 2-cylinder engine. So as much as this little 1-cylinder engine makes a pretty cool little bark, I just prefer 2 cylinders. You know, the experience is just smoother. You get, I think a better noise overall, because it does sound like more of a what you'd expect from a sport bike, whereas this kind of sounds like a dirt bike, this 300R. But the main reason I like the 2-cylinder engine is you don't get the buzzing. So on the R3 and on the Ninja, and indeed on my bike, you know, the 500F, and my friend's bike, the 500R, you know, it's a much smoother experience, especially at kind of main road and highway speeds. But on this thing, as long as you stay below 60, it's okay. But the moment you get up towards that 70 kilometer an hour mark, and 80 and then 100, it really starts to vibrate, and you really notice that through your ass. It's so noticeable when you get this thing up and going. So that's, and I think that over time, I think that, you know, after several hours of riding, you come off this thing and be going, oh, I really need to sit down. It vibrates so much, you know. And I mean, I'm sure dirt bike riders know what I'm talking about, and I'm sure they get used to it. You know, I'm sure they go, well, that's just the price you pay for having a dirt bike. But I think given that you can get a 2-cylinder 300cc bike in the Ninja or the R3, that's probably why I wouldn't get this bike. But now here comes the but. The problem is, the biggest kind of stick in the works, if you like, is the fact that the 500 series bikes from Honda exists. So even though if I had to choose between, if I could only ride 300cc bikes, so if I had to choose between the Yamaha R3, the Honda 300R, and the Ninja 300, I would take the R3. That's kind of my opinion on it. But fortunately, I don't have to make that decision because there are other bikes around, and I think that's the main reason why I wouldn't get the R3, because Yamaha wants about $7,000 for the R3, $7,000, which is a lot more than the Ninjas and the 300Rs. So, and in fact, at $7,000 for the R3, that puts it awfully close to the 500 series bikes from Honda. So, I mean, my bike, the 500F, or we'll stick with the 500R because that's obviously the fair comparison. You know, at $7,000 for the R3, you're really close to the 500R. You know, the 500R I think is about $8,000, maybe a little bit more after you put a pipe on it. But I personally think for that extra $1,000 or that extra $1,500, I think the 500R is a much better value for money bike. You know, because if you step up to that size, you're getting a bike that feels like a big bike. You know, it actually feels like a proper full-size bike, but you know, it's still not big, so big that you can't handle it. Whereas no matter which one you get out of the 300R, the R3 or the Ninja, they all do feel like little bikes at the end of the day. You know, they feel like little baby bikes that are designed for people to really start on, and that's fine. But for me personally, I really prefer the slightly bigger bike and the slightly bigger engine, because when you get on the 500, the difference in power is really obvious. You know, it's not just a little, oh yeah, I suppose the 500's a little bit more powerful than the 300 or whatever. It's, no, the 500 is much more powerful than the 300. You really notice it. You notice the extra torque down low, which is really useful for commuting around the city, and you just notice the extra horsepower. It's very noticeable, and that's because, you know, when you're talking about a range of very low powered bikes. So, you know, my bike, the 500F, the 500R is the same, has like, I don't know, I think it's like mid 40s in the horsepower or something like that. And so when you're talking about bikes that are all very low horsepower anyway, an extra 10 or 20 makes a massive difference. That's the bottom line. So that's why I wouldn't have any of them. You know, I think that the R3's the best of the 300s that I've ridden from the Japanese manufacturers, but I wouldn't have it because the 500 series from Honda exists. And for that reason alone, that's why I would have a 500 from Honda. And I mean, and I'm glad I got one, because that's the one I chose. I know it seems a little bit self-serving, because I'm basically telling you guys to go out and buy the bike I got. But it's true. I'm not sort of trying to sort of bullshit you guys because to go get the bike that I got. You know, and I'm also not telling you what I'm also not sort of telling you what A1 wants to hear, because, you know, if it was up to me, if I couldn't ride a 500, if you know, if learners could only ride 300 cc's and no more, then I'd be having the R3, because I do think it's a better bike with the 2 cylinders, the gear indicator and things like that, and it looks a bit better. So I would be having the R3, but because I can ride a 500, I wouldn't get any of them. So that's kind of my consumer advice for the day. I kind of felt like this was a good video to kind of put that in, because I've ridden a few of these bikes now, and I've ridden, you know, a handful of bikes from the big Japanese manufacturers, Honda, Kawasaki and Yamaha. I've yet to ride anything from Suzuki, so when I get a go at one of those, it'll be interesting to see how my experience with Suzuki fits into these things. But yeah, that's kind of where I've ended up over the last sort of few months of riding these bikes, is that the 500 series bikes from Honda, 500R, F or X if you're into the more sort of adventure style of riding, they're just super good value, and that's why I would have them over any of these 300 bikes. But that's all I wanted to say, guys. Kind of a quick video. Hope you enjoyed a bit of a burn around on the 300R. It's a great bike. If you decide that 500s is too big for you, then you are not going to be disappointed by any of the 300s I've been riding. I'd have the R3, but if budget's a problem, this is the next best thing. So go for this. But honestly, go get a 500. Alright guys, well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.